Hi everyone, welcome to week 6 of Lit 215. We are only 3 weeks out from finishing our course, which is just insane, but I know it's going fast and I am excited to see how we continue. So this week our theme is on personal identity. I think this is something we can all relate to, as we all have, an idea of who we are and who we want to be, or if you don't have an idea of who you are, we all have kind of dealt with these questions of who am I and who should I be? So I think that's what these pieces this week explore in more detail. I'm going to keep this video short, I hope, because there are a couple others I'd like you to watch in addition to mine. So the assignments we have for this week, pretty straightforward. Reading reflection 6, discussion board 6, and then your literary critique assignment is due on Sunday. I am going to push the due date for the reading reflection actually to Friday. So, excuse me. Your reading reflection and discussion board will be due Friday. The readings for this week include 2 poems, one called Freeway 280 and the other Ending Poem. These are both by Latinx authors. And I think there's some really interesting themes. Ending Poem is actually written by a mother and daughter at the same time. So each line is from the mother, then the daughter, the mother, then the daughter. And it's very, very cool to see both how their self-identities differ, but also these similar strands. It almost sounds like it's one person. And they kind of talk about how that identity is shaped and how they define themselves from, by where they're from, where they live, their genetic heritage, all of that. Freeway 280 is actually about someone who grew up next to a highway and how that area is sort of seen as a forgotten place. And it's sort of this homage to where we come from and where we consider home. Then the longer pieces we have this week, one is an excerpt by Frank Chin from Donald Duck. It's a very interesting kind of look at how both Chinese people in particular are perceived, and then also how this character perceives himself because of those stereotypes. Then we have a piece by Dorothy Allison. This is not in your text. It's actually PDF that I scanned. So it's called Don't Tell Me You Don't Know. And this is a really interesting piece. It might be cool to compare it actually to Ending Poem. There's a lot of discussion about what it means to be a good daughter, a good mother, and just a woman in general. And then finally we have a satire piece by Percival Everett called The Appropriation of Cultures, which involves some more discussion of racial tension and struggle, but also I think brings up some really interesting points about how we define ourselves by the groups that we're a part of. So some very cool pieces this week. I hope you all enjoy them. While you're reading through them, think about how each character in these stories define themselves and why they define themselves that way. And then kind of ask yourself, how similar are these characters to your own personal identity? And if they're different, why are they different? So what accounts for these differences and how we see ourselves? So, for example, the Donald from Donald Duck definitely has a negative self-perception of who he is as a Chinese person. He both doesn't want to be Chinese, doesn't think he's American, feels left out at school and unaccepted by his peers and even by his family. And if that's not the experience you have with your own culture, maybe ask yourself why that is. Why is our experience different? And then finally, how can multicultural literature help us better understand ourselves? I think this is especially important for adults and for those of us who already have a pretty ingrained sense of self. There's been a lot of discussion about incorporating multicultural stories for young children, like in children's books, and seeing more representation in that way. And I think that's very important. I am not saying that that's not where we should focus, but I also am kind of interested in discussing whether that is a continual process. If incorporating and interacting with multicultural literature at all stages of our lives can change how we perceive ourselves as we age, because who you are now may not be who you are in 10 years, and who you were 10 years ago is probably not who you are now, or maybe it is. I just think that it's interesting to look at the idea of, how can seeing another person's identity help us redefine ours, because these are always changing. So the major assignment you have for this week is called a literary critique. You could also call it a literary analysis. It's really essentially breaking down a multicultural piece in more detail. So you're going to choose a piece of multicultural literature to analyze. This can be, I do suggest it be one of the pieces from your project that I think will be the most advantageous. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write 3 pages of a critique. You're going to start with a summary. You could use something similar to what was on your reading list. That's fine. Just make sure that it makes sense in this assignment. I wouldn't just copy and paste, but you can summarize similarly. Then you're going to evaluate the piece. Does it work as a piece of multicultural literature? Give some examples from the piece of whether it does. Then I'd like you to discuss the author and the publication. So if it's a poem from Hear My Voice, for example, where was it published originally? And who is the author, and how does that impact how we view the piece? I apologize if it's loud. I live in the city, and sometimes you can't help that. And then I'd also like you to include a reference page in MLA format. I should be able to find an example from a previous class, but I'm going to post a couple other videos I'd like for you to watch to help you. One is on identity and literature. It's literally 2 minutes long, but a really good start to this week. And then also there's a video on writing a literary analysis that I think can help you in sort of gathering ideas. All right, even if you've never done a critique or an analysis before, just follow the instructions in the assignment sheet and you will be fine. I promise. There's really no one right way to do it. There's only tips on how to be more successful. So make sure you read the assignment sheet, look at the rubric, and then if I can find a student example, I will share that as well. So thank you all, and I will talk to you soon.